So in the NBA, no matter what time of year it is, whether it be during the season, the off season, hell, even sometimes right after the trade deadline, there are always trade rumors and trade scenarios circulating in the NBA media with YouTubers or just trade scenarios proposed from fans. It's one of the more fun things to speculate on in the NBA because a trade rumor could have not an ounce of truth to it, but once it has been proposed and spoken into existence, it now becomes something that is intriguing to think about as a what if scenario. Well, in today's video, I want to go over some trade scenarios that have been proposed by a host of sports platforms and my reactions to them, from ridiculous trades all the way to the ones that actually make a little bit of a sense to me and are intriguing. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, don't forget, tomorrow is my weekly Bulls hot take series, so if you haven't already, feel free to drop your hot takes in the comments to be included in tomorrow's video. And remember, a hot take is a statement or a prediction or an opinion you have, not a question. Obviously, feel free to ask your questions as always, and I'll make sure that I include in my mailbag videos, which I do around once a month or so. But a hot take is not a question, it is an actual take. So leave it in the comments below and I'll try to get to as many as I can. Lately, I've been doing 2 videos every Wednesday so I can get to as many takes as possible. But anyway, as I mentioned in today's video, I wanted to feature some Bulls trade scenarios that I really have seen in the last week or so. And I wanted to do this because, well, one, it's the off season, so it's a good time to discuss it, but also I get a lot of comments from people on various trade scenarios for the Bulls, and it got me thinking, what are some of the latest proposals and rumors that are going around the league? And which are actually the most viable options, right? Like which ones could actually be considered to be decent moves for the Chicago Bulls. And I'm gonna go over these in no particular order, you know, from best to worst or anything like that. I'll just explain my rationale for each and how they differ, and also which trades I like and which I don't. And first up, we have this trade scenario, which I know a lot of people have been talking about recently, which involves the Bulls getting Kemba Walker in exchange for Coby White, Tomas Satoransky, and Al-Farouq Aminu. Now, really, in summary, you know, this trade is basically Coby for Kemba Walker at this point, because if you're a Bulls fan, you know, Al-Farouq Aminu is not going to impact the team. If anything, we should be excited that we're able to get his contract off the books after he exercised his player option of nearly $10.2 million. And really, you know, he's included in this trade to make the money work for Kemba Walker, just because Kemba is making quite a bit of money. Then you have Satoransky, who I like. I actually think he's a decent veteran point guard to come off the bench and help run the offense for the second unit, but he's not part of the Bulls' long-term plans. On top of that, you know, the Bulls, rather than waiving him and not fully guaranteeing the last year of his deal, but leaving $5 million of his salary on the books, or choosing to fully guarantee his contract for the whole $10 million, leaving that on the payroll, well, in this scenario, they would be able to get his contract fully off the books as a result. So this trade really benefits the Bulls in that regard by offloading Aminu and Satoransky. Now, the question is, do you give up on Coby White after just 2 seasons in the league? Do you give up on a 21-year-old who has still showed promise, a great deal of talent, and actually started to look like a decent point guard towards the end of the season, rather than being an off-the-ball scoring guard? Do you give that up for a more established player, a former 4-time All-Star in Kemba Walker, who now fits the Bulls' timeline a little bit better with Vucevic and Lavine? Now, the issue I see with this trade, aside from giving up on a young and talented player in Coby White, is that Kemba Walker, although yes, if you stack them up side by side as they currently stand, Kemba is probably the better player between the two. However, Kemba is also 31 years old, and he has definitely taken a bit of a step back from his All-Star days, and he appears like he may already be on the decline, especially with the injury issues that he's been having. And he's on a very large contract, which is going to go all the way to 2023, where he'll be making $36 million next season and then $37.6 million the following season. That is a lot of money to add to the books for a guy that may be on the decline in his career based on what we have seen from him in this past season. Now, that being said, is it possible Kemba just really hasn't fit well with the Celtics, right? Given the rise of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, that just didn't allow for him to be as effective on offense as we used to see from him. And it's not like his numbers were horrible. I mean, the guy averaged 19.3 points per game, 4 rebounds and 5 assists in 43 games of play. However, his efficiency has dropped a bit, only shooting 42% from the field and 36% from 3. And again, you know, back to the never-ending topic for the Bulls, Kemba is not that great on defense, and the Bulls need better defenders on this team. So giving up Coby White, you're not really going to get any better on defense, and although you would get a little bit better on offense, slightly with Kemba Walker, you get a lot older as a team and you give up on a player who could have star potential. So for this trade, it's tough because I like the aspect of it, namely getting rid of Aminu's contract, but I would have to pass as it's not enticing enough. Maybe if Boston included a pick as well, then potentially we get done, but the injury issues to Kemba Walker do still concern me a bit. Now in this next trade, this is actually a sign and trade scenario for both teams in that the Bulls and the Heat would sign and trade and exchange Lauri Markkanen and Duncan Robinson. I mean, this isn't a bad trade. The only problem I see with this is, where would Robinson fit on this Bulls roster? Like, again, this doesn't improve the Bulls defense. And yes, it would improve their offense slightly, but Robinson would need to come off the bench behind Lavine, which isn't a bad thing, but he's not going to be as impactful as he was on the Heat because he's likely going to get a lot less playing time competing for minutes with Zach LaVine and Coby White. On top of that, I'm not sure if this trade would actually work because Duncan Robinson is likely going to command more money on the free agent market than someone like Markkanen would. So the Bulls would have to figure out a salary rise if they could even afford someone like Duncan Robinson, depending on his market value. Like if some team is willing to pay him close to $20 million a year, the Bulls are not going to be wanting to do a sign and trade to pay Robinson that kind of money. It just doesn't make sense. He's not worth that much. What I like about the trade though is that, is the fact that you get value for Markkanen in return rather than just letting him walk in free agency. And because you do it through a sign and trade, you don't have to sign Robinson as an outright free agent, but rather using him as a trade provision that allows you to use his salary to go over the salary cap and into the luxury tax. So yes, if this trade was presented, I would be all for it, even though I do question the fit a bit, as long as the Bulls didn't have to sign Robinson for an excessive amount of money. This next trade involves the Bulls trading for Colin Sexton, in which they move Lauri Markkanen and Coby White in exchange for Sexton along with Cedi Osman. I mean, this isn't a bad trade on paper. However, I've fallen more and more out of favor with Colin Sexton because I really don't think that he possesses the team mindset that I think someone like Coby White does. Yes, Sexton as of right now is the better player between the two, but Sexton is a high volume scorer. Again, no defense, and he's also not the greatest playmaker. I mean, for a point guard, he's averaging 4.4 assists in 35 minutes of play. That's worse than Coby White in terms of his assist rate. And of course, there are a lot of rumors on how Sexton isn't really the best teammate, that he's a selfish player, and you don't want to bring that kind of negativity into the locker room. I just don't see that this trade really upgrading the Bulls roster all that much. I mean, obviously Sexton is a great scorer, but the Bulls have that, right, in Zach Lavine and Nikola Vucevic. So they need someone who is going to be that facilitator for Lavine and Vuce, and Sexton just isn't that. The next one is actually interesting as it finally addresses the Bulls' need for defense, in that the Bulls would get Marcus Smart and Grant Williams in exchange for Sato and Thaddeus Young. So for this trade, it makes a ton of sense for the Bulls because Sato and Thad are both on expiring contracts. They are both partially guaranteed deals, so it frees up cap space for them. I don't like the idea of trading Thaddeus just because, yes, you're exchanging him for defensive player Marcus Smart, but you're also giving up Thaddeus's defense in the front court, and Thaddeus is overall a more versatile player than Smart is. But the fact still remains that Thaddeus isn't in the Bulls' long-term plans, and if you've got a younger defensive player in the backcourt, which the Bulls don't have whatsoever, I mean, even for their defensive players that they do have, none of them are in the backcourt. Marcus Smart is a two-time all-defensive player, and he's also on an expiring contract for next season, around the same amount that we would owe Thaddeus Young, actually, at $14.3 million. And since he is expiring, if it doesn't work out, well, then we let him walk in free agency. I mean, this gives the Bulls a little more bench depth, a scrappy player who isn't afraid to get hurt and hustle for the ball at all times on the court. On top of that, you had Grant Williams, a guy who hasn't really done much, hasn't really panned out for the Celtics, but he's also young, only a second-year player, he's 22, and does have some upside potential that you could work with. So I like this trade. I would definitely do this one. I just don't really see Boston doing this, as it doesn't really benefit them a ton, other than just getting, some veteran experience on expiring deals. Now for this next one, and apologies for the ad getting in there in the screen grab, but this would be another sign and trade scenario for Markkanen, in which the Bulls would send Lauri in exchange for Marvin Bagley III. And I actually really like this trade. I mean, one, because again, you get something in return for Lauri Markkanen rather than letting him walk in free agency for nothing, as I mentioned before. But Marvin Bagley, it's no secret that he isn't happy in Sacramento. And of course, Sacramento is just a mess of a franchise as always. But on top of that, I actually think that Bagley is a decent player. Like, he's never going to live up to the potential of being selected with a number 2 pick before Luka Doncic. Like, he's always going to have that haunt him and give him a bad rap. But that, and because he's also had injury issues, that doesn't help either. But look, Marvin Bagley is only 22. He's going into his 4th season in the league, so he's still on his rookie contract, which gives you flexibility from a cap perspective. He's averaged between 14 and 15 points per game throughout his career at 7.5 rebounds, at 50% from the field, and he's even added a bit of a 3-point shot to his game, increasing his percentage to 34% this past season, and on 2.5 attempts. So this gives the Bulls some depth at the 4 and the 5 coming off the bench, or even potentially starting at power forward for that matter. And guys, if he doesn't work out, you don't extend him a qualifying offer after his rookie contract expires. Again, all you lost was Markkanen, who likely was going to be walking in free agency anyway. And then finally, this last trade, which is more of a joke of a trade, and really just wanted to highlight how ridiculous this one is and how I have no idea how some of these media outlets come up with this crap. Well, I guess I do. For the ad revenues, you can see in between this awful trade, but in this one, the Bulls would give up Zach Lavine for Tyler Hero and Goran Dragic. Yeah, like, in what world does this make any sense for the Bulls? The Miami Heat have to be salivating at the thought of this trade. First of all, Goran Dragic, is going to be a free agent, so I'm not even sure why this would even be included in the trade package. And then Tyler Hero, a guy I personally believe is one of the more overrated players in the league because of the good run that he had in the bubble. Like, he's a decent player, don't get me wrong, and he's young with potential, and he is, he does have the ability to get better, but come on now. For Zach Lavine, give me a break. This is honestly one of the worst trade proposals I have seen, and that's saying something, as I've seen a lot of bad trade proposals over the years since I've been following the game of basketball. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think of all of these trade proposals in the comments. Which one do you guys like the most? Which one makes the most sense for the Bulls? Also, what are some of your trade proposals that you guys have of your own? Would love to hear them, so leave them in the comments, and of course, leave your hot takes for tomorrow's video as well. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in as always, and I will catch you in the next one.